Welcome to the Afghanistan Project Podcast. I'm Beth Bailey here with my co-host Michael Cook. Today we're bringing you another installment of our series focusing on the 2-year anniversary of the withdrawal from Afghanistan. We're talking with Joe Laude and Aidan Gunderson, both of whom were present at Hamid Karzai International Airport at the time of the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan in August 2021. Joe was a Marine Corps Sgt in the 2nd Battalion, 1st Marine Regiment, and Aidan was a U.S. Army Specialist and Combat Medic with the 82nd Airborne. Both Joe and Aidan now volunteer with Operation Allies Refuge, which advocates for those veterans who endured trauma or moral injury during the course of their service. Joe and Aidan, we're really glad to have you on tonight. Some of our listeners are going to recognize Aidan from a previous episode about the chaos at HKIA. And in that episode, we never had a chance to go into detail about the chaos at Abbey Gate on August 26th, which so many of us watched in the media when there was a bombing that killed 13 U.S. service members and around 170 Afghans. And so today we're going to be going into that particular event and day. Joe and Aidan, I'm sure this isn't going to be an easy topic to revisit, but we're so grateful that you're here to do it with us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
It's always good to have some great people on the show. So I guess let's start with talking about, your background briefly before August 26th. What had you been doing in the country? Where had you been at HKIA prior to August 26th? Aidan, would you like to start?
Yeah. So I was with the 82nd, and we happened to be one of the first planes that got there. I think we got there on the 15th. And by that point, we kind of bounced around a lot in HKI. We started at the military base called Camp Alvarado, which is the north side of the base, I think. Yeah, north. And that was a lot where, when the base was actually operating, it was where a lot of the military hung out. After some more people showed up, we got rotated down more towards the flight line outside of Abbey Gate, because the actual Abbey Gate was it wasn't quite outside of the airport. It wasn't quite inside the airport. There was walls blocking, your avenues to the actual flight line. And behind that was the actual flight line where my company had set up I think it was a gas station that they took away the gas pumps. It was just an abandoned building. And that's kind of where we were sleeping. We were filling in another battalion's, security positions. So basically, if Abbey Gate's a really long corridor here and the flight line's behind us, we were securing about 100 feet of fence in between Abbey Gate and where the civilian terminal was. And we stayed there for a lot of time, just sleeping in the dirt, pulling security. And that's how my company actually got involved with Scott Mann's Operation Pineapple Express, is because we were kind of just, not feeling underused, sitting there in the hot sun, not really doing anything if we weren't pulling security. So we started going down to Abbey Gate to see if there was anything that we could do to help. Long story short, that's a whole nother podcast episode. We got involved with Scott Mann's operation. And basically for the next 2 or 3 days leading up to August 26th, we were basically just doing shuttle runs for these interpreters that were getting sent the information to my commander and first sergeant's government phone from special forces dudes and basically just veterans trying to get their interpreters out. So we were just doing truck runs. We had a Ford Ranger, a couple, a Toyota Hilux. We were just going down there, pulling people out, and then taking them to the flight line. And we were just doing that for 3 days straight. So I think this is a good segue into Joe. I had a little bit easier time, I think, than at Abbey Gate because I wasn't there constantly. I was going down there for a couple hours at a time, grabbing people, and then leaving. I think Joe can talk about this, but it looked bad for the Marines down there that were just there 24/7. They didn't get a break from the chaos that was Abbey Gate. It was just an assault on all your senses. It smelled bad. It was loud constantly. You're seeing things you shouldn't have seen. But I'll let Joe go into that.
Yeah, so before we deployed to Afghanistan, I was with 2-1 Echo Company, and we were stationed in Saudi Arabia with the Special Purpose MAGTF, and we were assigned for the Task Force for Crisis Response. And so essentially during that time, it was like, training and prepping for any event that would unfold in order to go assess, a possible aircraft that would go down and go rescue that team that's out there. And it was, I think it was May 4th was what, Captain Bobby Barnheisel had stated when he knew about the evacuation that was going to be happening. And then it was, just from then on, it was kind of like the focus was understanding what a NEO or non-combative evacuation looks like and conducting some type of system in order to process people.
So at what point did you realize that you were going to be going to HKIA?
I think it was around August 15th it was August 15th or 14th when that first platoon was ordered to go. And I was with second platoon, and we left about 2 days after, August 17th. And at that moment, in between that, it was hard to get the certain intel updates. We figured after seeing what the reports were happening or coming in from the guys on the ground at the time that it was almost like a suicide mission that we're getting involved with. So we thought that we were going to land and it was going to be hot when we were getting down, from the bird. So we had no idea what the situation was happening, or what it was like.
And then what was it like? Oh, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I was just going to expand on that a little more. So the plane lands, and you have no idea what to expect. So kind of what did happen in those first 60 minutes from getting off the bird?
Yeah, so once we landed, we prepped, CS, all our flashbangs, everything, getting ready to possibly escort that plane from the taxiway to where it needed to go. So we were prepping for that. The situation wasn't like that when we landed. Luckily for the guys, the 10th Mountain 82nd and the 1-8 and some of our guys from 2-1 that were there clearing the airfield, they provided us that space. So it was almost like completely desolate airfield when we landed. So it was definitely a surreal time to get off and kind of rush off that plane and figure out that there was nothing going on. Definitely different.
When did that change? And I imagine at some point, when you get sent to Abbey Gate, everything became very different from that initial desolate feeling. When was that?
Yeah, so before we even went to Abbey Gate, our interactions with the Afghans at a holding area just outside of Eastgate, that was a surreal experience as well. And then seeing the first Taliban, it was, in my opinion, a eye-opening experience, because the entire time we didn't even think that we would even have the experience that our GWAT forefathers had. And so being in that position, it was very surreal. And then coming to Abbey Gate and experiencing the humanity behind all that was very surreal as well.
What was it about the Taliban? So were you seeing the Taliban pulling security? Is that what was an odd experience for you? Can you expand on the Taliban that you did see there?
Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, time to time you would see some beatings. You would see them coming through the crowd and corralling people. You would also see them, standing post on some Connex boxes. It was different. It felt, the guys in the past who were fighting these guys, and now we're working alongside them. It was, it didn't sit right with me personally, seeing that type of interaction. Very much would have liked it the other way, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, that was my focus when I was a civilian intelligence analyst with the Army. And so when I saw the news reporting that we were working alongside the Taliban, I about lost control of my bowels. I couldn't believe it. And I didn't see it like you guys did. So yeah, I can't imagine what that would have been like. So tell us more about that mass of humanity at Abbey Gate. I mean, Aidan, you talked about the smells and the sights. Joe, what was your experience of that?
So Abbey Gate, to me is it's synonymous with the desperation, like the word desperation, and you can 10 times that, like X that, for sure. You know, the canal itself was, you know, a disease-ridden sewage system, and essentially that was the system that we operated out of, and that's what basically kept us separated from the crowd, and so that was how you were going to pull these guys out. But it was, you know, to me, it's crazy to think that, you know, all these people that were you know, willing to come through Kabul and then willing to go through that canal and then travel, like, you know, just all over Afghanistan, just to come there, and then to get through that canal system, which was also laden with sea wire underneath the water. So you're wading through this water and getting cut up, and then potentially becoming ill because of that. And then if you were to get processed, or not processed, if you were to be selected to get processed, you still have, you know, that potential denial from the State Department, and then having to go back to the exit where the Taliban were executing people. That was the refugee dilemma at the time, and which kind of turned into our moral dilemma that we were facing with.
Were you seeing the people who were getting turned back? I mean, you were just seeing it. You didn't have to escort them out personally.
I did have to escort and push these people out. And, you know, at the time, it is part of the non-combative evacuation system that we set up. And, you know, you do have to sacrifice those morals that you believed in order to get that job done. But it was tough. You know, these people, it's, you know, most people that will talk about their story, they saw their loved ones back home as well when they did this. And so it was extremely tough to push people out who were literally begging for their lives, and then essentially would rather die than to face the Taliban again. So that experience alone, for the, you know, the different types of people that were involved in that, you know, the complexities of the human, you know, spirit, I guess, was crushed, having to push people out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the Marines that I've talked to all say the exact same thing, that the hardest thing to do was to have to force people back out. And actually, my two Afghan friends and their family actually made it onto the airport, got denied by state the first round, and got kicked back out. And I know that was just like such a devastating blow to me, but especially to them, and I'm sure to the Marines that had to kick them out as well. So I guess that kind of leads me to a question as to, you know, what were your guys' orders, and how often were those orders changing?
So for the most part, most of the guys, they were very unfamiliar with what these documents look like. And some of these documents, you know, I think part of the play on this was, you know, the State Department gave these individuals a false sense of hope as well. And so, you know, many people came with many types of different types of documents, you know, stating that they were working with the United States. Some of them even had very good English, which was kind of very confusing. And, you know, having to throw someone out that was very knowledgeable, and it just added to the pain, I guess, to some of the guys that were there. And then, you know, some of the orders were often changing because of the, you know, the State Department changing their, you know, what they wanted and what they needed, which just, you know, kind of just threw a lot of people off the entire time.
So what documents was the State Department saying that they needed?
So the big three that we were looking for were passports, anything with an American identification card as well, and then uh, the biggest one was the SIV, which was most of these guys had no idea what that looked like, and so you had to really search everyone's documents in order to find it. I think that was also a big factor in the amount of people that we were able to get out of that gate alone, in which if we had those documents or had reviewed those documents prior, we would have made that gate so much more effective.
Wow. That's one thing I've definitely not heard before, and it's really unfortunate. That could have been such an easy thing to train you guys on in advance, but it's just another indication of how very little anybody was prepared for what was coming. What about going back to that morning of the 26th? I mean, how long had there been talk that there could be a suicide bomber presenting themselves at some point?
I think we knew about suicide or a potential for an IED attack to happen. I think a couple days prior. I think it was around 2:00 p.m. When we had an initial threat where everyone had to stand by and close the gate off at that time temporarily. I think a big one as well was, it was just, knowing the fact that this was going to happen and understanding that there was that threat in the crowd, which was, kind of adds to the controversy behind the entire day alone.
Yeah, and I remember going down there on the night of the 25th to do like we kind of figured it was going to be like one of the last days to pull people out, and I remember being on the line looking for somebody because at night it was easier to determine yourself. You could have we always had green chem lights. It was much easier at night to be seen, and you could hold like a phone up and see the pineapple screen. I remember that night being standing there and the Marine like grabbed me and like put me on the ground, and we were standing, there's only like a 2-foot wall there, 2-3-ish foot wall. And I was like, what's going on? Why are we all ducking behind the thing? He was like, oh, there's probably an IED out there. Like super like nonchalant. And I was like, oh yeah, forgot about that. So that night our commander was like, yeah, we're not going back down there that night. So it was definitely on everybody's mind. And I think honestly, from the beginning with that many people surrounded by the gates, every gate was like scared of VBIDs and IEDs and stuff. But definitely I remember like like the days before the 26th, it was on everybody's mind, it seemed like.
So you guys knew that it was possible, and how did the next day start? Was there as much tension and concern about it, or were people just trying to move through to try to get things wrapped up?
Yeah, for our perspective, it was just another day at Abbey Gate. We knew about the threats consistently, but we're willing to face it and go out there and get the job done. The situation with the backpacks, there's no way. There's all the carrying items that these individuals had. You couldn't just you almost had to allow a situation like that to happen or potentially to happen in order to work that gate at Abbey Gate, any gate in HKIA. Yeah, that was part of the I think the biggest issue that that we were facing, aside from potential hostile engagement, small arms fire and stuff like that.
And were you guys, when you'd pull somebody out of the gate, what like security protocols were you doing? I mean, were people getting like searched right away, or were they taken somewhere else to be searched, or how did that work?
There were different methods for each individual. Every time someone would bring a backpack to me, I would try to rip it open just to take a look, and then sometimes people will just bring them on it and ship them over to where the State Department was processing people, and then they would search them through there. But it changed. Each company did their own thing, I think, or worked or managed the gate the way that they wanted to do it under their leadership. I will say the way that Echo Company did it was very, we did everything that we could possible to keep that gate secure.
Yeah, our company was similar. Whatever group we pulled out, we made sure we had the right number. Nobody was tagging along in a group, and then we searched them and the bags before we took them anywhere near away from Abbey Gate. We would pull them through, get them away, and then search them.
Mm-hmm.
And there was definitely it was kind of it was the way that everybody seemed to be doing it. It was like pulling them away from the process, and then somewhere down the line they'd get searched.
Yeah. And Aidan, how were you guys identifying the pineapple guys?
It was a lot of different methods. None of us had phones. The 82nd, when they do the rapid deployment, they don't let us take our phones, for obvious reasons. But the commander and first sergeant always have their civilian phones. So it was usually like kind of like a list, like here are the names. They're going to be here possibly at this time. This is what he looks like. This is how many people he has with him. And it was just matching those up. When we got to the gate, an image that we would see a lot was like a pink screen on a phone with pineapples. Or they would just be even sometimes just yelling our CO's name. And I think at some point we were trying to use, code words and stuff. So it was stuff like that. Just nothing that I ever saw, but when the commander was like, "Oh yeah, that's the person," he would check him on his phone.
Got it. It's still got to be so challenging. I mean, just from the pictures, everybody knows how many bodies were in that canal. So I can't imagine, trying to pluck somebody out of that.
Well, and it was even hard to get. Yeah, it was even hard to get to the canal. A lot of families didn't even make it. They get turned around at a Taliban checkpoint. They just couldn't. Yeah, there was a lot of families that never even that we either missed. And also standing up there at the gate was hard for those families. A lot of them maybe would try to go up there and stand the heat and no water for a little bit, and then they'd have to go back. And so we did miss families, and some families didn't even make it close.
Yeah. Do you guys want to talk about maybe where you were when the blast occurred, and what that was like and what followed that?
Sure, why not? So we were going down there. It was my commander and first sergeant actually had to go to a meeting, and we thought we were done, to be honest, because they said the gate was closing at, I think it was 5 or something. So we were like, "Oh, we're done. We don't have to go back down there," which was honestly kind of a relief. I felt bad for the people down there, but it was not a fun place to be.
Yeah.
And our commander and first sergeant got back, and they kind of pushed it to 7 or whatever. So it was like, we'll go back one more time. And before we got in the trucks to go out there, our first sergeant was like, "Well, let's smoke one before we go, have a cigarette before we go." So we had a cigarette, we talk, and we're like, "All right, let's go back down there for one more." I was keeping a number in my head for how many people we had pulled out. And I think we were at 320 something.
Wow.
So we were like, let's get over 330. We just wanted to get over 330 because, and so we went back down there, and I don't think I heard the blast. Well, I must have heard it, but I don't remember hearing it because we parked the truck. I took about 10 steps, and I just remember feeling the punch, and then my ears were ringing so I don't remember hearing how loud it was, but I'm sure it was loud. And after that, I just looked up and saw already a plume of smoke just going super high, super fast into the air. And I don't even remember what my initial reaction was. I don't even know how long it was, but I just remember staring at the blast. And then I heard my first sergeant just yelling "Doc" at me, and he was already running because we were, I want to say 50 feet away from the actual Abbey Gate, where the gate was. We had some really big T-walls in front of us, so we weren't anywhere near the shrapnel zone or anything. But I remember running up there, and I was kind of we pushed from the outside in, and by the time I got in there, it was only 30 seconds after the blast had gone off. There was so many people all around, and we weren't even on the other side of the wall. There was just people all over the ground, injured Marines. And there was already like, since there were so many people already in the area, there was probably 2 or 3 people already helping the injured Marines usually. So I got to one guy. There's a young Marine on the ground. Like his face was like ripped off, like right here, like his mouth had been opened from shrapnel. And there was another Marine putting a tourniquet on there. So I sat down with him. I helped put the tourniquet on. Sorry, my mouth is dry. The Marine was kind of losing consciousness, and when he would go like this, and he was like starting to like choke on his blood. So I put my knee behind him. I was kept trying to talk to him, and the first thing that I really remember is like saying to myself like, oh, my hands are doing like medicine, but I didn't. It was almost like I was watching myself, because in a lot of those scenarios, and I found it for myself to be true, is like my training like kicked in, like completely. I was flying dead stick. I had no idea what was going on. My hands were pretty much doing everything. I was cutting off this Marine's clothes, making sure there was no other bleeding. And by this time, trucks had slowly started to back down the canal. So me and this other Marine, I don't even know if I looked at the other Marine's face, to be honest with you. But we made sure that he could still breathe, that he wasn't bleeding anymore. And that he was all packaged up. So we lifted him up, put him in the truck, and this is actually a lot. It's funny. I have a lot of gaps in my memory actually from this point on. It's like I've had people, once we got back, we were writing our sworn statements, and they're like, "Do you remember this?" And I was like, "No, not at all." And so yeah, I had somebody come up to me and be like, "Oh, you remember picking that Marine up and putting him in the back of that truck?" And I was like, "No, I don't remember that at all." So that's where I was. I could tell more, but Joe, do you want to say where you were at in the first? Because that was like probably the first 30 seconds.
Yeah, so I think we were about 100 meters away before that blast went off. A little bit, like I would say a little bit more than that.
And were you, sorry, Joe, were you farther down the gate, or were you behind? Where you would have been behind me?
Yeah, so I was actually all the way down the
By the
corridor.
connexes?
Yeah,
Okay.
and then what happened was we heard the blast, and immediately after we heard what it sounded like to me was 762 going off immediately after, and my staff sergeant who had experience in Afghanistan, not my personal, but one of our staff sergeants who had experience in Afghanistan, he was the first one who said that it was an IED, and he was telling everybody to get down there right now. So I took my team and we started heading down, sprinting down as fast as we could. And in my mind, I thought it was just civilian casualties. I couldn't picture us taking any, but my oh fuck moment was when I saw a Kevlar on the ground, a helmet on the ground, and it was full of blood. And that was when I knew that we got messed up. And when I went down to the gate, I think that the significant part to me was the fact that I got to witness junior Marines that looked like corpsmen, that looked like they knew everything that they could put in through their training on that moment. To me, it was a very awe-inspiring moment to see Marines as young as 18 years old packing wounds and helping these other guys get the casualties off the X. That alone was a moment that I still reflect on, and it just makes me extremely proud about that unit that I was with. That acted immediately to help their guys out. So it's extremely tough to talk about. Seeing something like that, but it doesn't. You can't say it without being prideful about the guys that were down there doing such great work.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah, there were like, sorry, do you guys have questions?
Keep talking.
Okay. Yeah, to what Joe said, I mean, I said the same thing after the event. Like, it's crazy the response that the Marines had. Like, just everybody was all hands on deck. It was really awesome, but it was crazy. I mean, after I kind of, there's a parts of it, my memory that were really fuzzy, but I remember working with this Marine trying to put tourniquets on. I'm working with two people at a time. There's a guy next to me. His hand was all like tore up from ball bearings. I remember just looking up, and it was like, it looked like it was like a movie scene. There's just you could smell iron everywhere. There's blood on the ground. Past the gate, there was just like screaming, and I heard the gunshots too. 100% heard the gunshots because I remember being scared. I was behind a wall. I was like, I'm glad behind this wall because we're definitely getting shot at. It was clear to me at least. I remember looking up and seeing families, like Afghan families, trying to run towards us for help, just covered in blood, like soaked. And the man dresses and the things they wear are all like one piece of article clothing. So it looked like they were just wearing red because whether it was their blood or somebody else's blood, it was just a lot. And they were holding babies, and they would run towards us, and the Marines had to point their weapons and say, "Stop running." Like stay, because obviously that looks bad. I think in a lot of people's minds they were scared of a secondary attack because it's a big MO of those guys. I just felt sad because like I didn't want those families to be that scared, but like also I was worried that they also had bombs, and so I just remember seeing a lot of people getting moved, and at this point. One of my trucks and my company's trucks backed up. So my first thought was like load it up and take it to the hospital because we knew where one of the clinics was where our medics were, but like we needed to go to the Norwegian hospital, which was right next to where the PAX terminal was, which is where we were taking people. So only like me and a couple other people knew exactly where it was. So I took the injured Marine I was taking care of. We picked him up, put him in the truck. They put another Marine in the truck who had like 4 tourniquets on his legs. His pants were just like soaked in blood. And then they put a Marine who like pretty much, for lack of a better term, almost looked like a mummy. He was just wrapped up in so much stuff. And everything that was wrapped up in was already getting soaked through. And they put him on the back of the truck like this. And I really wish I could have sat back there, but I had to sit in the front. So I had one of my sergeants sit back there and hold the litter while we drove to the airport. And I should be laughing, but I remember my supply sergeant was the one driving the truck. So inexperienced. He's from Puerto Rico, doesn't speak a lot of English, and I just remember him being very, very scared. And I was like, Ortiz, I need you to drive fast but carefully because there's still so many people like on the sides doing this or doing treatment. And so we drove, we got out of there. It was a stick shift also, and we had to cross the airline with planes coming in. My buddy almost stalled it like, right on the flight line with the plane coming in. So with 3 casualties in the back, we almost got hit by a plane. That would have been extra bad. But so by the time we got to the PAX terminal, I think we were either the first truck or one of the first trucks because it didn't seem like anybody knew what was going on. So I had to get out of the truck, sprint in front, and like yell at people to get out of the way because they were just like walking around like they. I was thinking while I was sprinting, I was like, did you guys not just see the huge smoke cloud or hear it? But I don't think anybody knew in the hospital either because I was running up to the hospital. I was just screaming like, I got 3 wound casualties, 3 blast wounds. I said something along those lines. And I saw some dude, I think he was smoking a cigarette out front of the hospital, like threw a cigarette, run inside, and then they came out with just like a team of doctors. So I'm glad we got them out quick, but I remember sitting there and we parked the truck. They started getting everybody out and they had to reassess the one Marine's tourniquets because he, if you move, the tourniquet might come off, he might still be bleeding. So they were checking it, and I was holding his hand, and he was just wailing, like, I don't want to die, I don't want to die. And it, like, I tried not to fucking break down right there. He was just squeezing my hand. I was like, you're good, buddy, we're at the hospital. I had no idea if he was going to be good or not. His pants were, like, just red with blood, so that was pretty tough. And we, they got the 3 casualties in, and my sergeant in the back comes up to me. He had some, like, blood on his face. And he told me, he was holding my hand, and then halfway through he just stopped holding my hand, and it was like broke my heart. I was like, buddy, you're taught in medic school to just be like, we're good, man, we made it to the hospital. So that's what I tried to do, but I'm sure you could see right through it because it was very sad, and I felt bad for putting him in that position, you know. But we had to go back. So after that, we went back, and that was all within like 5 minutes. So it was still crazy. I'll let Joe go now again if you'd like. Joe, do you got more or no? Keep going.
You're good, bro. Keep going.
That's pretty much the end of my story. We went back to I think my oh fuck moment was late, surprisingly. I was coming back, and there was so many cars coming that we had to park on the outside where our company was, and then just run back to where the rest of our company was. And I remember stopping at one of the first, it's called, I think we called it Turkish Gate or something. I don't know. It was some other gate. It wasn't quite Abbey Gate. It was pretty far back. And I remember seeing 2 litters come by with Marines holding bodies with litters on the back, and then they took them around back and they put them, in the bomb shelter away from everybody, which is, that's a telltale expectant sign. As medics, you put the triage blanket over and you put them away from everybody else so it doesn't affect everybody else's morale. So that was my oh fuck moment. I was like, oh, those are American casualties, dead American casualties that they're taking out. And I actually saw my PA who was down there at the time, and we both just looked at each other and was like, fuck. Like, that was literally all we said. And I sprinted back down to Abbey Gate, and every single Marine that had a rifle at that point was pointing at the wall. Like, you couldn't you couldn't go in between them. Every single Marine was pointing at that wall, because on the other side of the wall was Abbey Gate, but to the point where people could walk. So they were just waiting for anything to happen. They were all pulling security. At this point, a lot of the casualties had been taken. I actually found 2 of my junior medics who had showed up, who deserve all the credit in the world, Specialist Limbu and Specialist Bowser. They stayed while I took those first casualties, and they mainly just treated shrapnel wounds on kids for a lot of time. And I remember seeing my medic, Specialist Bowser. He was writing a note card down for everything he had done for this patient, or everything that he and another medic had done. And this Marine was high out of his mind. He was on morphine. He had his arm was all mangled. He had tourniquets on his arms, on his legs. And the only thing he could say was get everybody else first. Get everybody else first. Give me last. And he was one of the last ones there. And I remember seeing that and being like that's stuff you see in the movies, like that kind of courage and stuff. It blew me away in that moment. I was, I've so much respect for the Marines after this, but and then after that, I finally got back to my first sergeant. I think all the casualties had taken. He was sitting there smoking a cigarette, and we went back to our shack after that and tried to debrief as much as we could. I actually had a water bottle in my pocket that had burst during all of this. So I got back to the company and I checked my pants. I thought I peed my pants because the water bottle had burst. I was like, that's not a good look for the senior medic to be peeing his pants. But all that to say, it was I can't give enough credit to the Marine. It was a tough day, obviously. Understatement.
Yeah, there's so many stories of just wild courage that just haven't come out yet too. And I feel like I hear new ones all the time, and it's just a matter of time.
Well, and that day, and HKI was so crazy that I try to tell this to everybody. Like, everybody has a valid story. Like, I don't think my story is crazy, but I want to show people that they need to tell their story too. Like, it's cathartic, but also there is a story from everybody. Like there was so much that happened those 2 weeks that you couldn't convince me that you don't have that somebody was there doesn't have a story.
Yeah. And Joe, to go back to your story, I think you said that right after the blast, you think you heard AK fire. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So what's interesting is, if you look at the DoD report, it'll say that it was not a complex attack. Marines were not getting shot at after the blast. But it sounds like almost every single Marine that I've interviewed was like, we were getting shot at after the blast.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting.
There is one, some individuals who they got shot. During, it just seems like it's consistently This government has been gaslighting this community since that event alone. And it just, it's difficult for a lot of us when we feel like our stories and our experiences are not factual, even though we were the ones there. And that's kind of, part of the objectives going forward is kind of, getting everybody their chance to speak about it and get the right, we get the right, the history behind what happened and not some, government agency.
Yep,
Absolutely,
for sure.
because we've seen, I mean, Michael, you and I, that's what we're doing here is documenting all the things that no one in the government will talk about. And it sounds, to say that sounds like I've got a tinfoil hat on my head, but that's not the case. I've seen the videos, I've seen it's so devastating. And, I want to talk about the moral injury aspect because I feel like that's been a constant theme in the last few weeks for the podcast is the importance of revisiting that story. And you guys have both talked about the bravery of the Marines. I mean, you guys made me cry. I haven't cried in a podcast episode yet, but thank you. You have made me cry. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And it's just a testament to our armed service members. And, to address that moral injury, we have to create those stories that let us remember that part and not, there's a lot of feeling that, oh, we failed. And perhaps the US government failed and a lot of leaders failed, but the men and women on the ground have shown incredible bravery in the face of so much stupidity from up above. And that's the part of your stories that's the most meaningful to me.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and to add to that, we, a lot of us feel like the job is incomplete, like the operation like continues, and to me and my, the way that I view it is, it's not over until we get everybody back home, and that's part of like the purpose behind some of this as well. And then we're not all home, even though we're home too, as veterans. And that's part of the objective behind Operation Allies Refuge Foundation as well, is ensuring that, everybody gets back home. And that to me is one of the most, or probably the biggest priority.
Yeah, I was thinking about that when you were talking about, having to escort people back across the line and knowing, at the time you couldn't have absolutely known. I had a very small smidgen of hope that the Taliban would do what they said, that they wouldn't, make life a hell on earth for women, and that they wouldn't go and kill all of their former enemies. And that's what our, alliance with them on the ground was predicated on too. And they broke every single promise they made because the Taliban cannot be truthful about anything. Anyway, the point is, you've watched now for the last 2 years, just this increasing, return to pre-2001 conditions. And you're still, how many people are you tracking at OAR? Do you guys track like individual families, or how does that work?
So, when we first started this, I can't say the amount of Afghans that flooded the DMs or went to the website and sent us emails. Then you start establishing relationships, and you start trying to see if you can network enough to give these guys enough help. The biggest problem that's in the way is some of these individuals that served us or served with us. They're not eligible for the SIV, and so that's been the biggest obstacle in our way when it comes to helping them. When I was working Abbey Gate, I was communicating with my brother who was in Afghanistan before that, and he was trying to get his interpreters out through me, and they were showing up, and they're getting their signs out to try to get my attention on the gate. And the biggest problem is when they showed up, that was when August 26th and the bombing happened. And so they never got their chance to get there. And, that still weighs pretty heavily on me. And it's still something that, in a lot of ways, I feel like I need to find some redemption through this, because I feel like I let them down. And so that part of the mission is still exists. And for me, it's not over until we get everybody back home.
I can understand that feeling 100%. I get the emails and the DMs and they break your heart. Have you been tracking that family then for the last 2 years and just see, what have they gone through, if you have?
Yeah, so we do have some families that we've been watching over. We've been able to help a few, but at the same time, it's tough, and they're scared. They're definitely extremely scared to approach the borders. They're scared because they just feel like part of it is also the feeling of abandonment and almost giving up, and that's the biggest thing. Is some of these families feel like there's nothing that they can do at this moment. And just giving them encouragement like every now and then, and maintaining those lines of communication is sometimes like that's because we're waiting at the same time to help these guys out in the best way possible as we continue to build. Until those moments and until we have the things set in place in order to facilitate that. Just maintaining those relationships and making sure that we stay connected.
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes. It's a tough job to keep doing it. I applaud you guys to be 2 years later and still involved. There's a lot of moral injury in that as well.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy to it's rewarding working for OAR, but you are thinking about Afghanistan every day.
Yeah.
And Joe kind of touched on this too. Is the thing that stands out to me a lot with this organization too is us on the U.S. side, we came home, but the war is not over internally. I think for a lot of people, it's sad. I think that the 82nd maybe just had another suicide related to HKIA, or at least somebody that was there. It's not over, and I don't think it's good that side of it is going to be over forever. I don't think, Joe, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm never going to stop thinking about Afghanistan. It's not going to stop affecting me, at least for a long time, it feels like. And that's I like this about this organization is because the biggest thing that helped me was just talking to somebody who understands. Like, we're such a niche thing that not a lot of our GWAT. The GWAT understands us. We were all in Afghanistan, but HKI is very, very specific. And the first time I talked to somebody that wasn't in my unit after I got out of the Army was Joe. And I had that just immediate, he understands me better than most people could ever even hope to understand. That the community that we're building, I think is the part that I care about the most, getting everybody that needs the help in to the brotherhood and to stay here, keep them accountable.
Yeah. And that community is the most important thing, it feels like, right? Just having that brotherhood, sisterhood of the people that are, have experiences similar to you is so huge and helpful to people that are struggling.
Yeah. Especially given the fact that, like you guys, talking about the 762 and all the things that most people have no awareness of and that they can't begin to comprehend, but you guys can. It's really important to have that community and have that ability to come together. What would you say? There are probably a lot of people watching this who maybe are like you guys and were there. So if they're struggling right now, you would tell them, reach out to OAR Foundation, be part of the rewriting of history. What would your message to them be?
I would say just reach out to us, honestly. The biggest thing is, I think, just to know that you're not alone. anybody's struggling, call me whenever they want, and we could just talk about Afghanistan, or we could talk about nothing. And another thing that helped me was to give back to the community. I think a lot of the feelings that come with moral injury is like guilt and shame, which, if you're guilty and you're shameful about something that happened in HKIA, I think we all are. There's something, but there's nothing really that can be changed about that. And then, go to therapy, you could change the way you're thinking about it. But if you're with people who understand that, I think that's the biggest thing, or giving back. Like, I've been giving back to OAR. I'm helping out, trying to build the organization because it's almost like selfish. It's also making me feel better. It's easing my guilt a little bit. So that's what I would say. If they want to help, come help, and at least, reach out and, make a friend. We can be Snapchat buddies, play video games together, anything.
Yeah. To add to that as well is, every DM that I read, I always, I tell them I at least give them my phone number, and just chat with them and hear their story. Sometimes even the guys that you go with out there, they're not, you're not going to be able to just spill everything out. And part of that relationship that a lot of men need to start having as well is the ability to kind of just talk about situations that are difficult. And it's all about iron sharpening iron at the end of the day, and getting better, and having those stronger relationships. I think the biggest thing is just like Aidan said, you're not alone in all of this. Me personally, I've also been to some dark places, especially going back, like literally feeling like I'm going back to Afghanistan every day, doing this line of work. To me, the way that I like to think about it, in moral injury, it's a spiritual journey that you have to take. Wear that moral injury on your sleeve, and use it as power. Use it as a way to do something bigger than yourself. To me, the way I look at it is redemption, and that's action, going out and taking action and doing something about it. And for the most part, yeah, reach out to us, because I will pick up the phone. I will talk to you. We'll chat for hours. I don't care.
Please call me. Yeah.
You guys are incredible. Most of our listeners will know that we always end with a story from an Afghan. And unfortunately, we have run out of stories from Afghans, which we would like to once again make a plug that, we want to be on here. It's one thing for us to talk about, the situation in Afghanistan. But we want to make sure that the world is hearing from Afghans too about their perspectives. So whatever you want to tell us about, if it's, that you're pissed at what the Americans did, if you feel abandoned, if you are struggling with anything currently, we want to hear about it, and we want to share it with our audience. So send us an email, send us a poem, send us a long story, and we'll edit it so that it's a little shorter. But send whatever to the Afghanistan Project Podcast at gmail.com. We want to hear your stories. And Aidan and Joe, thank you so much. This was really emotional, and I think it will also be cathartic and healing for a lot of people. So thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having us and giving us the opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anytime. Come back anytime. We want to thank all our listeners too for sharing their time and supporting the people of Afghanistan. So Tasha Kaur, and we hope to see you again soon.